You and I are going to be spending a lot of time together in this course, so I thought it might be good for us to just talk about a few things that are going to help you get the most out of your learning experience in the time that we spend together. So first things first, make sure to go ahead and download your course guide. This is where you're going to find all of the resources that we talk about throughout the course, any keyboard shortcuts we cover, as well as the options to download additional templates that we cover in this course. So you can always reference back to these in the future. So within your course guide, you're also going to get a bit of a preview of what you're going to create in each lesson, and you will also have these designs pop up in the first couple of seconds in the intro slide of each lesson, so you'll always know what you're in for before you start learning. So make sure to go ahead and download that, and then if you haven't already, make sure to go ahead and sign up for a Canva account. So you can use the link I've provided in your course guide, which helps to support me without any extra cost to you, or you can just head to canva.com to sign up. My recommendation would be for you to try the Canva Pro trial as you're going through this course so that you can really leverage everything that we talk about throughout these lessons. But if you've already done the trial or you just want to be a Canva free user, you're not going to be at a huge disadvantage. We're going to talk about a lot of workarounds throughout the course, especially because I know it's not within everyone's budget to actually upgrade to the pro version of Canva, and it also just may not actually make sense to your personal circumstances. It largely comes down to saving you a lot of time. If you're using Canva every single day like me, it saves you hours and hours and hours of time every month to be on the pro version. But if you're only planning on using Canva once or twice a month, you may never really feel the need to upgrade. So we're definitely going to talk about a lot of different ways that you can do things if you're not on the pro version, but I will also be talking about some really cool pro features so that you can see what's kind of right for you and your circumstances. But now let's talk about what you can expect of this course, and then I'll talk about what my expectations are of you as a student of this course. In terms of what you can expect of this course, it's essentially laid out in different sections so that you're able to progress from being a complete beginner in the world of Canva to being an advanced user by the end of the course by building on your skills with each lesson, because I've made sure to introduce a minimum of one new skill, tool, or technique within each lesson of the course. And then at the end of each section, you're also going to have an exercise that you can do to sort of test the skills of what you've learned within that section. And there is a lesson dedicated to each exercise, and there's also details in your course guide. Because let's be honest, watching Jamie Oliver cook on your TV screen every night is probably not going to make you into a world-renowned chef, and watching me on your screen doing amazing things within Canva is probably not going to make you into an amazing Canva creator unless you actually take action. So I just kind of want this to feel like you're sitting down at a coffee shop with a friend who has whipped out their laptop and just gone, hey, do you have a couple hours to learn about this cool new thing that I also know a little bit about? So hopefully we can create that vibe, but of course, you are entirely in charge of your own learning experience here. So I've given you a breakdown in your course guide of how long each section of the course is going to take for you to complete, so you can plan your study time accordingly. Because your schedule is unique to you, and you might be learning this in the evenings, on the weekends, during kids' nap times, or just whenever you have a spare minute. And I want to make sure that you feel like you're in charge of when and how you learn. Now, throughout the course, we're going to be covering a range of business types and industries, from fictitious businesses I've made up to designing for existing brands out there, and showing you how I would go about analyzing their existing branding and incorporating that into a design. Because honestly, even if your plan is to only ever design for one brand, I still think there's a lot of benefit to understanding how the design process works for various industries, various vibes, and all of the intricacies that go into creating content for a particular brand. So I've tried to incorporate as wide a range as I could of different industries so that we can really test our skills and really try and apply this to different scenarios. Now, I also want to be really respectful of your time as you go through this course. So there will be times when the very first time we do something, we will always manually find it within Canva. But from that point on, we might switch to using keyboard shortcuts, and I will always let you know what that shortcut is on your screen in both PC and Mac format. So you will always know exactly what I'm doing. But we may just need to save a little bit of time by doing that instead of you watching me right click and find something 1800 times throughout the course. And same goes for occasionally speeding up some of the tutorials, because there will be times where you watch me do something 10 times and maybe the 11th time you don't really need to watch me do it again for 25 minutes straight. So I may occasionally speed up the video if I feel that it's more beneficial for you to speed up that learning experience, and then obviously slow down, take pause, and really explain in really deep detail whenever we are covering a new tool or technique or function. All right, now let's talk about what my expectations are of you. So look, as I've said, I don't control how you learn throughout this course. It's entirely up to you. It's unique to you. But my hope is that you're able to take action whenever possible, because I've been teaching this particular course since 2018 in some way, shape, or form. There's been a lot of variations of it throughout that time, but I know from the people that have taken this course that the most successful students, the ones that have had the biggest results from what you're about to learn, are the people who practice as they went along instead of just watching me do stuff. So it is my hope that you're able to actually take in the exercises that I've provided you with and maybe create some additional ones of your own, so that you're always feeling like you're not just watching and absorbing information, but you're actually putting it into practice and developing that muscle memory within Canva. I first started designing in Canva in 2016, making somewhat questionable designs like these for myself and for clients. And then when I first began teaching this course, my thumbnails for the course looked like this. And the designs that I was teaching people to create in this course looked like this. And the only reason that I've gotten to where I am at today in terms of my confidence level in my design work within Canva is because I practiced. I made a lot of ugly designs, let's be honest. I made a lot of trial and error, lots of errors. But you know what? That's the best part about this, is that there is no huge stakes in the game. You don't have to really invest in any materials like you would in a lot of other professions. It's completely free for you to just create digital designs, and if you screw it up, you can just change it. So don't take it too seriously. Try and have a little bit of fun with it. As adults, honestly, we take everything so seriously, and we're going to really try and infuse some of the fun and creativity into this process, because learning is also state dependent, and if you're not having fun doing this, then your brain's just not going to learn. So we're going to work on that together. But before we move on, I did also just want to say that Canva changes its interface a fair bit, and that's a good thing because it means that they're evolving and they're adding new features. But it does mean that occasionally there may be times where things look slightly different on your screen, or a button's in a different place, or something has changed slightly. And yeah, as I said, that's actually a good thing. But I do my best to try and keep this content up to date as possible. But with Canva changing and us talking about all the social media networks, which are also constantly changing every 5 seconds, I'm pretty confident that by the time I actually publish this course, there's going to be something in it that's already out of date. So while that does not make me happy, and I wish that everything would just sit still for a second, I'm confident that you're going to be able to find the flexibility and adjusting and making sure that the core foundational skills that we're going to be learning in this course are still going to be applicable no matter where a particular button sits on your screen versus my screen. All right, now in the next lesson, we're just going to dive into different ways that you can make a more creative you. So I'll see you there. In this lesson, I'd love for you to take some time to set some goals for yourself for what you're hoping to get out of this course. And before you get mad at me and say, "Okay, Mags, I'm here to learn Canva. Let's just go and do that, shall we? Let's hurry this up." And I feel you, because we just want things all the time and we want them now. But learn Canva as a concept could mean something totally different to you than it does to me, than it does to the next person. Same way as I want to be rich could mean making 100 grand a year to one person and making $10 million a year to another person. Or in my case, having not one, but 2 jars of cashew butter in my pantry. That's my rich life. And that's very different to what it would be for most people. So for that reason, I think it would be great for you to actually identify, what does success look like to you in this course? What are you hoping to achieve? And actually really think about that before moving into the course. For example, maybe you'd like to be able to just create a simple Instagram reel, or be able to look at any brand out there and know exactly how you would create a social media post for their particular business. Or perhaps you're just learning a new skill with absolutely no expectations and you're just trying to have fun and you want to allow your brain to be playful, and that is the goal. So whatever your unique goal or goals are, I just want you to write them down, and hopefully with a little bit of help from me, we're going to be able to not just meet those expectations, but actually exceed them throughout the course. And I also wanted to say that we're not really here just for you to learn Canva. We're here to also shape a much more creative you. And what I mean by that is that as much as AI can be helpful, and we're going to talk about AI in a later section of the course, in an AI-dominated world, which is sort of where we're moving to, we have to do a little bit more to stand out as human creators. So we do have to probably work harder than we've had to in the past to be a little bit more creative, but also to really tap into the things that make us human, that allow for human connection, which is what makes our content so powerful. So for example, where an AI tool might tell you to create a post about the 7 easy dinner recipes for your family, you can then spin that into, these are my go-to dinners I love making midweek when I'm short on time and, let's face it, even lower on energy. And that works because people will often not really remember what you're saying or creating or sharing unless they really resonate with something about your brand, your story, your values, or anything that actually makes up your online persona. So to put it in perspective, I'm going to use myself as an example. Obviously, there are other Canva courses out there that exist that you could have taken, but something about my style resonated with you to the point that you're here. And I have been teaching this course for a few years, and it's gone through a few different versions. And if I'm honest, at the beginning, it was pure information, no flair. I was basically trying to appeal to everyone and was then appealing to no one in a way, because it was just pure information. It was just pure learning. It had nothing to do with me as a creator. And since those days, I've learned to be myself more as a creator and infuse my stories and my humor and my personality and my experiences into this course and my other courses, so that it is this unique experience that only I can provide, and also means that I'm not an AI voice actor because I mean, yeah, it would be really hard to recreate that experience in an AI generated way. And it means that then people who really connect with it, this teaching style, really do, like really connect with it. But on the flip side of that, it also means that there will be people who absolutely hate it. There will be people who take so many issues, and absolutely have in the past, with how I present information and how I share stories. And that's not a bad thing. It means that people are feeling something. I'm making people feel something, whether it's positive or negative. And social media works in exactly the same way. The most successful accounts are ones that are a little bit polarizing, in the sense that they know exactly who their audience is, and their audience is like, this is the brand for me. I get these guys get me. And they're also just brands that are really not liked by a lot of other people who are like, what are these guys trying to do? I don't understand. This doesn't work for me. And that's okay, because it means that when you have fans, you have true fans. You have a loyal following. You don't just kind of produce generic content that's trying to do everything for everyone, but it really appeals to just a small section of people, and those will be your true diehard fans. So you might have seen these playful real estate videos making the rounds on Instagram. This one by Mike at Pride More Real Estate, which I've linked within your course guide, has more than 86 million views, and it's literally just the outtakes of him taking tiny little breaths before filming house tours. And that might seem silly, but there's a reason why videos like these really work for people, and it's because they're different from what else is going on out there in these, especially in these not so fun, traditionally not so fun industries like real estate. It makes it different and it's creative and it really sucks people in and draws people in. So you're not always going to be able to create show-stopping content. It's not actually humanly possible. If you could just create viral content, I would be very impressed, but I haven't actually found anyone who can do that. But the point is that as you go through the course and we're talking about these different topic areas and different designs that you can create, I just want you to always sort of think about how you can do things a little bit differently, make them a little bit more human, a touch more creative, or tweak something a little bit to just really tap into the needs and wants of your audience. Because just remember that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So I just want you to really think about that as you go through the rest of the course. What do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? I want you to write some thoughts down around this and write a couple of goals about what you want to accomplish throughout this course and by the end of the course. And I will see you in the next lesson where we start talking about the psychology of colors. Over the many years of teaching Canva to my students, I've gotten a lot of questions around colors and color palettes and color schemes. And so in the next lesson, we're going to get into how to actually select colors for your brand. But in this lesson, I just wanted to focus on the psychology behind why brands pick certain colors. Even though, no, I don't think this is sort of the be-all and end-all, and you don't necessarily need to follow this in order to pick the perfect brand colors. Sometimes the brand colors that you choose are just ones that resonate with you for reasons other than the ones we're going to talk about in this lesson. But I do find this stuff really fascinating, so I'm hoping you will as well, and I wanted to share it with you because sometimes you just have this idea that you want people to associate your brand with a particular feeling. You want people to feel a certain way when they see your content coming across their feed. And there are, of course, lots of different ways to do that, but colors actually play a really important part because there's something really primal about how we respond to certain colors. So I wanted to go over that with you in this lesson. Okay, so let's take a look at the color emotion guide and talk about why certain brands have chosen particular colors to connect with you and their audience. So starting with yellow, which is a fun color, it's optimistic, it's warm, and brands like McDonald's and Subway definitely use this because it's playful and it's vibrant, while there are other brands like Cat who create construction equipment that also use it because it is also a sign of safety and caution. Then we've got orange, which is creative, it's youthful, it's super fun, and it gets you really pumped up, which makes it perfect for brands like Nickelodeon and Fanta. Then we're moving on to red. Now, red has actually been proven to have the ability to raise people's heart rates when they look at it. So it is this kind of bold, powerful, exciting color, maybe even a little bit sexy depending on the brand. And basically it makes it the perfect color for brands who aren't afraid to put themselves out there like Coca-Cola and Netflix. Then we have purple. Purple is the color of royalty and it's the color of wisdom, and brands often use purple's regal sort of anything is possible vibe to really draw people in who are looking for something a little bit extraordinary because it has that kind of magical, mystical feel, which is exactly why brands like Hallmark, Cadbury, Monster.com, and the Sci-Fi Channel all leverage the power of purple. And my own brand has a few different colors, but purple is a really big part of my color scheme because of this exact vibe. So I am really a big fan of purple for this reason. Then we've got blue, which is a calming color that conveys feelings of strength and trust. And so technology brands like Dell, IBM, Intel, and Facebook all leverage and take advantage of this kind of vibe. So a lot of tech companies will often use the color blue for this specific reason. Then we've got green, which maybe this particular shade of green doesn't demonstrate this very well, but green in general is quite serene and it's peaceful and it makes us think of growth, which is why many brands whose products deal with agriculture and the environment might utilize this color like John Deere and Animal Planet, but also companies like Whole Foods who will take advantage of the fact that people also associate green with health and wellness. And you'll notice my own brand also has a lot of green in it for the purposes of signifying personal growth. So I'm going to go through my entire color scheme in the next lesson, but for now, just know that these are some of the decisions that went behind me also choosing my color scheme. And lastly, we have black, white, and gray, which signify balance and innovation. So a lot of car companies will use it for this reason, but you'll also see companies like Apple using white, black, and gray, and silver throughout their brand and products, and companies like Nike also getting on board with this minimalistic look. So they're all sort of using it for different reasons, but it is kind of this minimalistic balance, innovation, minimalism, all of those kind of vibes will generally be associated with brands who leverage almost like a colorless palette. So they're going for this monochromatic black, white, and gray feel. But of course, there are plenty of brands whose logos and color schemes are not that clear cut, including my own, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And not everybody sort of fits neatly into one color category like Coca-Cola, for example, and that's perfectly fine. But hopefully knowing a little bit about the emotions that we associate with these colors will really help you in creating content for social media. So for example, if you're going for a minimalistic feel, you might use light neutral colors and really simple fonts like this one. Whereas if the emotion you're looking to evoke in your audience is one of trust and calm, you might use some more blue hues, light and dark blues, but generally this kind of blue vibe instead. And if you're looking for something really fun and playful, then you might actually combine a few really bright colors together. And in addition to just the color schemes here, you might start to notice that across these 3 slides, we were using different fonts as well, which help to additionally evoke even more emotions on top of just the color schemes that we're using. So we're going to talk about fonts and all of that in just a little bit, but this was just to sort of demonstrate that it's not just the words on a page, it really is everything else that's going on around it. And Canva also have a really great resource here in case you want to look beyond just the meanings that we were talking about here of loads of other colors. So I've linked to this in your course guide. But for now, in the next lesson, let's go ahead and actually look at how to create gorgeous color palettes. So I'll see you there. So we've already talked about this a little bit, but a brand is so much more than just its colors and its fonts and its logo and all of the other things that go into building a brand. But brand recognition is a huge part of your marketing strategy, and colors do have a lot to do with that. So while I want to encourage you to play around with this and not just sort of stick with the same color scheme forever and ever for the sake of consistency or because someone out there told you should be doing that, I do think it's important for you to develop some sort of brand color scheme and learn how to use that in your design work. Because just imagine that if you woke up tomorrow and Facebook all of a sudden changed its signature blue to orange, or Coke started using the color blue for their logo, or McDonald's golden arches were no longer so golden and they just went into some weird obscure color. That would be such a weird world to live in because we associate these brands with these very specific color schemes. But that being said, brands definitely evolve and change over time. Even really big brands like Airbnb and Starbucks look totally different from when they first started their businesses. And honestly, I can't really imagine a world in which they'd kept their original branding. So I'm really glad that they changed it. And the same is true for me. My own branding has completely changed from what it initially was when I first started my business. So we sort of started with this very chaotic brand because initially the business was more of a travel brand that I was running with my partner, Nick. So our color scheme was supposed to symbolize the beach and the ocean and everything that sort of appealed to digital nomads at the time because that's what we were doing and that's who we were trying to appeal to. And then in 2020 is when I took over the brand and started running it solo, and I toned things down a little bit. Same sort of color theme, but just slightly different colors and slightly more professional. And then in 2024 is when I started working on the business as my own personal brand under my own name. And so my color scheme, my logo, my fonts, and even the images that I'm using are now so much more catering to my ideal student and my ideal customer. And the brand is bold, it's professional, it's a little bit playful. Whereas previously it was sort of all playful, and yeah, that there just wasn't really a strategy in this prior to me actually having a brand designer do it. And it's also much more accessible, which is something we're going to talk about a lot throughout the course. So let's go ahead and find your perfect color scheme, and we will then add it into our Canva workflow in a later lesson. But just know that it is absolutely perfectly fine for you to evolve your brand look and feel as your business evolves, as you evolve, as your brand values evolve. So the first awesome free tool that I want to bring your attention to is the eyedropper tool, which is a free Chrome extension, which allows you to basically pick any color from anywhere on the web, whether it's an image, even a video, anywhere that you're like, ooh, I love this and I want to steal it for a project, or I want to actually build my color scheme off this. You can continue to pick colors. Let's say we're doing this from this website because we really like the vibes here and we want to build our color palette around it. And you can start to see that it's already building out a color palette, and each color, as we hover over it, has its own hex code. So a hex code is essentially just a representation of how much red, green, and blue exists in this particular color. And it's a code that is a combination of 6 characters. So that might be letters, numbers, or both. So this is what you're going to be able to put into Canva when you're designing. And if you find a color scheme that you really like or hex codes you want to save, you can always export it, or you can just copy and paste these across into Canva. So that's just a really cool little free extension, but you can also do this within Canva as well. So I know at this stage you are not familiar with the Canva interface, and that's okay. We're going to go through it, but just so you know that there is an option for you to do this within the Canva editor if you're just purely doing this from images. So the color eyedropper Chrome extension is great because it allows you to do it sort of from anywhere. But once you're within Canva, you can import an example color palette or an image like this one and build out from there. So at this stage, I've just got black here. So if I was going to go up top into my color section, you'll notice it says the document colors are really just transparent, black and white. But let's say I want to go ahead and pick some colors from my image, so I can use their built-in color picker here, or underneath here, it'll also say these are the actual photo colors. But let's say I want to actually manually pick these out so I can start building out a bit of a color scheme. And you'll start to notice that as I'm picking these, now the document colors represent those colors as well. So I can use them anywhere in future designs. Again, you will get to know this editor so well throughout this course. So if you're like, this looks super intimidating and I don't know what I'm looking at, that's totally fine. I just wanted you to know that even though there are awesome external tools that do this, you can also do it within Canva, and then these colors will show up here so you can continue using them throughout your design. Then if we're talking purely inspiration for color palettes, I love going to Pinterest and putting in the keyword that I'm looking to represent. So for example, in this case, it would be a minimalist color palette, because there are actual brand designers that have put this together, because this is not how my brain works. My brain does not function in beautiful color schemes, which is why my brand looked so chaotic at the beginning when I was responsible for creating my own color scheme. It was not pretty. It did not work. It was not accessible. It's really just best to sometimes leave it to the experts, which is why I love coming to Pinterest and browsing and actually just gathering some ideas. So sometimes you'll notice it actually has hex codes in the color palettes, and sometimes it won't. So that's where either the color picker, the eyedropper Chrome extension can be handy, or you could screenshot this and bring it into Canva or another tool that I'm going to show you in a little bit. But just so you know, this is a really great way to just gather inspiration. And then an additional tool that I want to bring your attention to is called Chroma. Now, Chroma is a little bit design heavy in the sense that it is built for professional designers, and us mere mortals can still get value from it, but it's specifically created for designers. But I do find it really helpful because it does give you some color combinations that I would just never think to put together. So in the interest and in the spirit of brainstorming, I did want to just show you how it works. So you start off by choosing 50 colors. That's not necessarily 50 colors that you want to build your color scheme around. It's just 50 colors that appeal to you for whatever reason. So I've already done this. I'm going to go through this really quickly with you so I can show you exactly what it looks like once you pick those 50 colors. All right, so now we're going to say start training, and it's going to give us some options. So once you've chosen your 50 colors, you're going to get some really trippy and really cool color combinations here that I would just never, like, this is not how my brain works at all. I would never put these colors together, but how cool does that look? And you can always swap them around to see what it'll look like with the base color the other way. And then you can also favorite some colors and look at the details. That'll tell you the hex codes, and it'll also tell you your web content accessibility guideline ratio. So this is something that's turned off, I think, by default, but I would definitely turn this on so you can make sure that the colors you're being presented with would pass those accessibility guidelines, because you also don't want to be kind of creating color schemes that don't work across the internet. But this is just, again, another cool little tool for you to allow you to brainstorm. And what comes up here is so dependent on the colors you've chosen. So because I sort of went through it and picked colors at random, not ones that actually appeal to me, I would say that these results are a little bit skewed. Generally, when I do it by picking colors that really appeal to me, I get some probably better results. But yeah, it's something for you to just test out and just have a little bit of fun with. But then in terms of actually building out your color palette, I would definitely go to coolers and then start the generator. This is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, color palette building tool, because it just allows you to be really playful, but also really methodical in how you create your color palettes. So you'll see it says press the space bar to generate color palettes. So we can press the space bar, find a color palette that we like. Oh, I actually really like this one. And then let's say we could like a couple of these colors, but maybe not all of them. So let's say I like this mint green, so I'm going to lock it, and I like this Mimi pink, and I'm going to lock that, but I'm not quite sure about these. So now these are going to be locked into place, but if I keep hitting the space bar, it's going to continue to shuffle through the rest of these colors to find other combinations that will work with the ones I've already chosen. Then let's say I like this purple, but maybe it's not quite where I want it to be. Maybe I want to go a little bit lighter or a little bit darker, or I actually just want to select the color by hand. So I can go ahead and do that, and I can use the slider to go more blue, more red, more orange, etc., etc. So you can play around with this so much. And if you don't want to go through the process of doing this manually, of course, you can also upload your own sort of reference photo, just like you would within Canva, and build out your color palette from there. It's going to give you a color palette already, but let's say you don't really think that the colors that it's chosen are applicable to what you're looking for. Maybe you want it to be slightly different. So let's say that's my color palette. I can then say, I'm going to open that in my generator so I can tweak these a tiny bit, because I don't know what this color is, but I don't love it. Let's go a little bit more gray. Okay, so let's say I really love this color palette. Now I can go ahead and export that, and I can export that as a PDF or an image. Doesn't really hugely matter. We just want to make sure that we are able to actually save the hex codes so that we can use them later on. Or you can also sign into coolers so that you can save your color palettes, which is also an option. Then once you export it, here's how it'll look. So you'll have all your hex codes there that you can import into Canva. So that is a really lovely way of building out your color palette. Lastly, let's talk about accessibility. And as I said, this is something I'm going to talk a lot about throughout the course, because I don't think that enough people are talking about it in design courses. And I think as human beings, we sort of assume that other people interpret the world the same way that we do. And there's a very good chance that the way you see color is not the same way that somebody else might see color, which is why these tools exist. So I'm going to show you what my own color scheme looks like with this checker. So I've just put in 6 of my colors, and it will effectively tell me how I can utilize my color scheme in a way that's accessible for everyone, that everyone can read the text on top of the colors that I'm using. So It's essentially just a way for you to decide, are the colors that you've chosen, do you have any kind of green flags here, or is it all sort of grayed out because you've chosen some colors that just do not play together very well? As long as you have at least a couple of color combinations that work, that will allow you to create content around, that's all we're really looking for at this stage. And we are going to actually look at a tool within Canva that's going to help with this when it comes to your actual designs. But this is just a really quick and easy way for you to do like a real quick final check to say, ooh, the color scheme that I've built is good to go. I don't have to worry about it not looking good on social media or within emails or on someone's website. And in a little bit, we're going to go into how different fonts and font pairings also play a really big role in establishing your brand online. But for now, in the next lesson, I wanted to go into something that we should all be across as content creators, which is all about understanding different licenses and how you can utilize different assets based on where you're getting them from. So more on that in the next lesson, and I'll see you there. Okay, so as we go into this lesson, I do want to say that this is not designed to make you super paranoid about using other people's content, and I'm going to be giving you some awesome free to use websites in the next lesson. But I mainly just wanted to go over this because I think it's important for you to know that there are just some restrictions in terms of how you can utilize assets from websites online, and you basically just want to make sure you're doing everything correctly and legally. But I should also say I am not a copyright lawyer, so always make sure that you are checking the licensing options. Whatever website you're pulling images from, it will always have details about how you're able to utilize images, videos, music, and all the assets that you need in your content creation. So always do your own research, especially if you're going to be pulling from websites outside of the ones that I am going to be mentioning within this course. And yes, those are just some disclaimers, I suppose. But now let's just get into it and start diving into the world of licensing. So the royalty-free license type grants the buyer a determined set of rights to use content in a few different ways for a flat one-time fee. So that means you effectively pay for the license only once, and you can use it forever within the accepted ways that it details without any further payment. You'll usually see stock image companies use this term a lot. So you might be able to purchase an image once from a site like Shutterstock as an example, and then you can use it on your own website as many times as you want. Then we have Creative Commons, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to building globally accessible public commons of knowledge and culture. And they help creators license their content according to the type of restrictions that they want to place on people purchasing and using their content, or in some cases, not actually having to purchase their content. So CC0 or Creative Commons 0 is the least restrictive type of license out there. So it allows people to distribute, remix, adapt, and build on, and even commercially without actually needing to attribute the original creator of the work. Of course, a lot of the time you will also see a stipulation that'll say crediting is appreciated but not required. So you can always credit the original creator, but you're not legally obligated to. And then other Creative Commons licenses might allow for free use, but might require attribution to the author. So they might say, yes, absolutely, use it. You don't have to pay for it, but you have to attribute the original creator. You have to credit them with that work. Then we have non-commercial, which means something is not primarily intended for or directed towards commercial advantage or monetary compensation by an individual or organization, which is a lot of fancy words, which basically means that, for example, if you're using this in a lecture presentation in a class that you're taking or for your personal project, then it would be non-commercial. So if you're using that image for an arts and crafts project, non-commercial. Whereas commercial use of an image would be reproducing it in any manner that is primarily intended for or directed towards commercial advantage or monetary compensation. So examples of that would be using images or videos or music or any other media that would be used in TV production or in, let's say, advertising on Facebook or Instagram. Now, the good news is that these kinds of websites that provide either free or paid assets are pretty much dedicated to transparency. So they're always going to be giving you warnings and details about how you can and cannot use their assets that you're either taking or purchasing from their websites. So that is making things a little bit easier, but also, as a side note, I would say a fair bit of the time, I wouldn't say majority of the time, but a fair bit of the time, if you do end up breaching copyright laws and uploading something that you're not allowed to legally use for your own purposes, you will just kind of get a warning from sites like Facebook or YouTube specifically that'll say this has a copyrighted element in it. It's usually music, but it can be other things. And it'll just tell you to re-upload it, or it'll tell you can't monetize it. And there's lots of other different things. But I would just say, yeah, don't depend on that because other bad things can also happen. So I would just get into really good habits and making sure that whatever assets you're using are either 100% free for you to use or have been purchased in the right way from these websites. So essentially, I guess what I'm saying is do not use Google Images, because I've seen so many people just like Google man laughing with salad and just, yeah, I don't know why you would use that as a search term. I don't know, maybe you're making a fun PowerPoint. Man laughing with salad, and then there's all these warnings that say, hey, this is not free for you to use. And then people just put it up on their website anyways, and that can create a host of issues. So just don't use Google Images and use some of the amazing websites that I'm about to provide you with in the next lesson instead. Okay? I'll see you there. So bigger brands out there will often stick to taking their own images and videos or purchasing these from more high-end professional sites like Shutterstock for images or Storyblocks for professional videos, because these sites also allow them to be very specific in terms of the search terms that they're looking for. So what I mean is that if I was a business owner looking for an image of something like a woman in business attire shooting a goldfish, or cats having a picnic and reenacting scenes from the Titanic, then I would definitely have to purchase these because they're so ridiculously specific that no one's gonna really give these kinds of images away for free. But I'd say that most of the time we're just looking for a nice image to put as the featured image of a blog post or in the background of a design we're creating for a social media graphic, in which case a lot of the free websites that we're going to discuss in this lesson are definitely not just going to meet your expectations, but I'd say they're going to exceed them, because I think that they just have so many extra capabilities now that they definitely didn't when I first started designing with these websites. But also one thing I would say is that this is especially going to become key if you're a Canva free user, because you're so much more limited with the assets that you're able to access within Canva if you're not on the Pro plan. But that being said, I, as a Canva Pro user, actually use these websites pretty much daily as well, because they have other capabilities and also much more search engine functionality than what's available within Canva. So I think it's worthwhile for both Canva free and Canva Pro users to know about these websites. And of course, I've provided all the links within your course guide as well as a few extras. So let's just get into it. So let's start with Unsplash, because Unsplash has some really, really gorgeous, beautiful, very artsy, minimalistic photos that are perfect for so many designs. So within Unsplash, you can search for, let's say in this case, let's search for beach. And you will have some that are on the Unsplash Plus. So you'll see a little plus there, which means that is a paid feature of the platform. You'll also see some ads, but largely you will find images like this one that are completely free for you to use and download in various different dimensions, which is a huge benefit. So you can go as large as the original image size, which in this case is pretty much 4K. So that's awesome. Another great option of Unsplash is if you're logged in, you can create collections. So in this case, I could just create a brand new collection, which in this case could be something like beach. And these are, I could make it a private collection so no one else can see it. But let's say I'm doing this for a client, I can just spend maybe a half hour just researching images that I think they'll like. Anytime I have an image that like this one that I really like, if I scroll down, it'll give me related images as well. So I can keep going down these rabbit holes of collecting related images into my collection, and then maybe go and download them all at the same time, or maybe even just send the link to my client and say, what do you think of these images for our next blog post or our next social media post, etc. So that's a really beautiful option in terms of Unsplash. If you're ever curious about their licensing, you can head on over to license here. It'll essentially tell you that all images can be downloaded and used for free, commercial and non-commercial purposes. No permission is required, but appreciated. Essentially, you can do anything with these images that you want except to sell them. So you can't just take an image off of Unsplash and literally just say, pay me $40 for this, and you can't create a competitive website. Everything else you can do with them. But of course, always check licenses if you're not quite sure. Before moving on, I did just want to say that whenever you're in Unsplash, you can actually filter your search results by the license type in terms of free or Unsplash Plus. So if you don't want to see any of the Unsplash Plus images because it's a paid option, you can just search by free. It will still have some random ads for other things, but that way you know you're only searching for free images. You can also go by landscape or portrait images only, which is really handy if you are searching specifically for images for social media posts and you know you want them to be in vertical format. It's not quite as critical with images as it is with videos, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but just so you know that that is an option within Unsplash. So Unsplash is a really great option for that. I also really love Pexels. I largely use Pexels for videos, but they also have really beautiful photos. So we are going to go and look for a beach video. And in here, I can also filter this by orientation. So let's say I'm looking for videos specifically for social media like Instagram and TikTok. So I want vertical videos only. So that's what I would use Pexels for. It's really beautiful for that, and they do have some very high quality gorgeous videos. And again, you would want to make sure that you are logged in so you can create collections just like you can in Unsplash. And once again, you can download in various different formats. If you are going to go through to downloading, it'll tell you you can show appreciation or donate to the creator. But again, with Pexels, there's no attribution that's required. So those are my two go-to. There's also Pixabay, which is a lot more stock imagey, but they've got a lot better search engine functionality. So for example, with Unsplash and Pexels, you are able to get so much variation for something like beach. But if you're going to get really specific, like you want man on mountain or something like that, that's a little bit more specific, you might need something a little bit more stock imagey. And of course, they're going to have promotions here as well, but then they're going to possibly have a little bit more variation and a few more options for you for more specific keywords like man on mountain. Within Pixabay, instead of searching for images, you can also search for music and sound effects, GIFs, etc. You can also find free music from directly within the YouTube studio, which I'm going to link you to, but within your YouTube channel, which you will have even if you don't have, an active channel per se, but once you're within YouTube studio, within the audio library tab, you've got a whole range of all these beautiful music. And when you check the license type, it'll tell you that there's no attribution required and you're able to use this music however you want, not just on YouTube. You can also use it on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. So this is where you can just go through and download some music. That's an easy way to do that. Or the next step up again is to use a website like Upbeat. Now I love Upbeat because it's $7 a month at the moment, so it's really affordable, but it's got a lot more variation in terms of the tracks that you're able to get. It's also a little bit smarter, so once you start downloading some music, it will kind of get to know what kind of music you like, and it'll start recommending some future music tracks that are coming out that are similar to the ones that you've downloaded before. So as you're pulling images from these websites, I would definitely create some sort of Google Drive, Dropbox system, whatever your preferred cloud storage system is, and organize these assets so that you know that 3 years from now, 5 years from now, this is an image you pulled from Unsplash or from Pixabay or from Pexels, so you know it's free for you to use down the line, and you're keeping it separate from any purchased assets or any assets that are not freely licensed for you to use for any purpose whatsoever. And it also just makes it really nice and easy because that way things are actually a little bit more organized. So if you need to look for images that you've used in the past, they're organized somewhere outside of Canva as well. So that's my preference. I would definitely put it somewhere in a cloud storage system. And later we're also going to talk about and look at what assets are available to you within the actual Canva design interface. But for now, in the next lesson, we're going to start talking about how to find the best fonts for your brand. So I'll see you there. So it may not seem like it at first, but choosing your fonts can feel quite overwhelming. If you're a Canva free user, you'll be limited to the free fonts within Canva. And while that might seem like a bad thing, I actually don't think it necessarily is, because it does take away some of the choice and overwhelm. But if you're a Canva Pro user, you can use a lot more fonts directly within the Canva app and also import your own fonts, which is super fun. But like I said, can be a little bit overwhelming. Now, this GIF here is just for fun because I love The Office, but it's true that choosing the wrong kind of font can completely change how people feel about your work. But the point is that when it comes to any design, but specifically when you're using fonts, the simpler the better. Don't try to pack your small graphic with 6 different font styles, because it just makes people confused as to what the most important information on the page is. So let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of fonts you might encounter within Canva and in all of your design work. So generally you will find serif, sans serif, script, and handwritten fonts. There will be loads of other categories like decorative fonts and slab serif fonts, for example. But these are sort of the main 4 that I want to focus on at this stage. So largely you'll be dealing with serif and sans serif fonts. And the main difference here is that serif fonts have these extra little tapers or lines, which might also be called tails or feet, which extend out at the edges of the letters, whereas the other types of fonts don't have these serifs, which is why they're called sans serif, meaning without serif. So serif fonts like Playfair Display here are often considered quite classic and traditional, while a sans serif font like Open Sans here might be considered more minimalistic and modern. Then you've got script fonts like Satisfy here, which is considered quite elegant and unique, while then handwritten fonts like Permanent Marker here are considered much more informal, playful, and artistic. So let's check these out in action. So you might have a serif font like these 2 as your heading font, paired with a sans serif font as your paragraph font. Or you could actually go sans serif for both the heading and the paragraph fonts, but just choosing a slightly bolder font for your headings to make them stand out a little bit more. So there's a bit of a differentiation there. Or you might go really fun and playful with a rounded font for your main heading font if maybe your brand is targeted at a younger audience, and then you could pair this with a more traditional sans serif font that has maybe more harsher sort of edges, or another rounded edge font like Quicksand on the right there. The point is that there are so many awesome font combination options out there and some great tools that can help you find the right options for you. But I would say that the thing you want to aim for is a maximum of 3 brand fonts. Otherwise, things can get very confusing. So let's start with a site like Font Pair, which can assist with just giving you some ideas about the types of fonts or font pairings that you can really just explore, because it can be hard to know where to actually start. So this will give you a good idea of which fonts work well together. Then there's Font Share, which effectively does the exact same thing, and you can customize the look and feel of the dashboard, which is just a fun little bonus. So you've got fonts, individual fonts here, or then font pairings. It has slightly less font pairings than Font Pair, that.com. Oh my gosh, they're so similar, but these are quite unique. So I really, really like them. And then you've also got some information about their licenses and how you can use these different fonts. Again, it's just a bit of an extra resource for brainstorming. But my preference is probably to just start with the basic Google fonts, because I just really like the way that they've laid this out. It's just how my brain works, where I literally go by feeling. So if I'm like, ooh, I want to go for something really playful and stiff, as if stiff is a category, or fancy or cute, this works so well for my hyperactive brain. Whereas for other people, they might prefer to have it a little bit less hectic. But I think this works really well, and you can go by different categories, but let's say you're going based off of feeling. So let's say we want to go for business. We can then type our sentence. So we can say, hey there, this is my sentence. That way I can actually have a good idea of what it'll look like. I can increase the font size so I can really see what the font looks like. And then I can jump into the font and get a really good idea of what kinds of feelings this font has and change the sentence if I want, but I can also see if it has bold or italic options and what it might look like at different sizes, etc., etc. And then I can also download the font and get an idea about licenses and things like that. So I really like that for Google Fonts. It's not as user-friendly when it comes to font combinations though, which is why I would then head on over to FontJoy. And FontJoy basically works exactly the same way as Coolors, which was the tool that we used previously when we were looking at color palettes, where let's say you're starting out with these 3 different fonts. You can type your sentence like you can in Google Fonts. So I can say, this is my sentence. And then we can just go generate. And it's going to give us some different font combinations. So remember we said 2 to 3 fonts max. So I like the fact that FontJoy actually gives you 3 different options, because a lot of the time brands will want to have 3 different options, not just 2, but you could alternatively just go with your heading font and your paragraph font if you only want to have 2 for your business. But in this case, yeah, I think you can kind of play around with a few different tools. You can also adjust the look and feel of the interface so it's a little bit more color contrast friendly. And then when you find a font that you like, just like with Coolors, you can lock it, and you can also come in here and adjust slightly or actually look up the font that you're looking for. So let's say I know I'm looking for Roboto, and this has all the different options of Roboto in terms of italics, boldness, etc., etc. So I can find one that I like, and it will add it in there. So the other websites are really good at actually finding our fonts, and then I would jump into FontJoy, put the font in here and see what it'll actually look like in sentence format. So I can see if the fonts that I think will work well together will actually work well together. But bear in mind that not all of these fonts and font combinations are going to be available within Canva, and especially not if you're a Canva free user. So I am going to be showing you how to import your own custom fonts if you're a Canva Pro user. But either way, whether you're on the Canva Free or Canva Pro plan, if you do want to just stick to using fonts that are within Canva, I've added some resources on how to look for these particular font combinations that only use Canva fonts within your course guide. So make sure to check that out. Or if you're looking for something truly specific and custom, whether it's for a heading font or maybe even for a logo, then I would specifically purchase this off of a site like Creative Market, where you can go to fonts and you can look at fonts by purpose. If you're looking to get a tattoo, that's super fun. Or for your email signature, that's actually quite a cool option for this. Or you can just go by different aesthetic options. Let's just go aesthetic in general. And then you can go through all these different options. Some of these would work really well for something like a logo, but probably wouldn't work very well for ongoing use. But then you can click into the font and just make sure that you are purchasing the correct license for that font. And if you're a Canva Pro user, you can then import this into Canva. If you ever have issues in terms of licensing, you can also ask them directly on Creative Market. And lastly, if you're feeling really, really fancy, this is just for fun. I don't know if you're going to use this, but calligrapher.com allows you to create your own custom font out of your own handwriting. And that is pretty cool if you've got good handwriting. Personally, I have really terrible handwriting. I once had one of my university professors describe it as that of a 7-year-old boy writing with his non-dominant hand, which was brutal feedback and really hurt my ego, if I'm honest. But you know what? Years later, I've decided it's okay to know your weaknesses. I don't have good handwriting. I'm a subpar dancer and a terrible singer, but I have other skills, and that's okay. But if, unlike me, you have really good handwriting, then definitely give it a go. It could be a cool, fun, creative exercise, or actually a really great asset for your business. If everyone else out there is chasing each other, trying to use the same fonts and same everything else, and all of a sudden you have this amazing custom font that no one else has, I think that could be really cool. But of course, it has to be right for you and your business. I think just overall, having these tools and knowing where they are just really helps me in particular, for my brain to not get too overwhelmed by trying to do too much. So these tools are specifically designed for you to just look at fonts and nothing but fonts. And that works for my brain to really just focus on that before I then start focusing on all the other elements of my design process within Canva. But that being said, if that doesn't work for your brain and you'd prefer to just jump into Canva, create a design, and see which fonts work for the kinds of designs you want to be creating, and you want to go about it that way, that's totally fine. Whatever works for you, my feelings will not be hurt if you decide to do things differently. And of course, I'm going to be showing you how to do things differently as well. But it's good to know these resources exist because you never know when you might need to use them. And now in the next lesson, we're going to get into some really key design do's and don'ts, as well as some common mistakes that people make when they're first designing. So I will see you there. So I'm going to be very honest in saying that this lesson definitely has a very dramatic title, but I just really needed you to hit play because this is an important lesson where we're going to talk about some key terminology, but also some really key mistakes that I see a lot of beginners in the design process make that I would ideally want you to not make and overcome them before we even start designing. So we're going to get into all of that. But one thing I did want to also say is that for me personally, it physically hurts me a little bit to think about my very first designs that I did for clients back in the day. But I wouldn't be here teaching you this, and I wouldn't be here feeling confident in my design skills if I didn't make those early days mistakes. So I think it's really important to learn the concepts and learn how to overcome these mistakes. But the real way that you're going to do that is to actually make a lot of mistakes and get better and better and get 1% better with each and every design that you make. So I think practice is definitely going to be key, but hopefully we're also going to be able to kind of allow you to embody these principles that we're going to talk about, because I'm going to talk about them a lot as we actually design. But one thing I also just really wanted to point out is I think it would be really cool for you to save the designs that you're making in the early days as a beginner somewhere in Google Drive or in Dropbox or somewhere in a cloud storage outside of Canva, so that in 3 years from now, 5 years from now, you can look back at those designs and go, whoa, I am so much better than this now. I know so much more. And look how far I've come. Because I think it's really easy for us to take it for granted and sort of forget how much we're improving, and not actually take time to reflect on how far we've come, and maybe only just get overwhelmed at how far we still have to go and start comparing our design skills to other people online. So I think it's really cool to just keep sort of a memento box of your early designs somewhere so that you can really track your progress. I'm really glad I kept my early client designs, because now I can look back at that and go, okay, I know what I wouldn't do there, and I know how I would do that very, very differently. But that's great because it gives me the confidence in knowing that I'm a lot better at designing now. So let's get started with some key terms here. You might have heard of both of these file formats at some point, but just to cover the basics, there will be some quality that's compromised when an image that's taken on a camera is converted into a JPEG, but it allows you to have an image that's smaller in size. And when I'm talking about size here, I mean the amount of space that an image would take up on your computer or in cloud storage, not the actual dimensions of an image, because those wouldn't change depending on the file format. And then PNGs are larger in file size, but will allow you to have the option of having transparent backgrounds like I have here. And they also tend to handle things like gradients much better, which when you save a design with a gradient as a JPEG, sometimes the gradient will just look a bit funny. So generally speaking, I always save my designs from Canva in PNG format, because it also holds really crisp lines around your illustrations and contrast better than JPEG images. But photos you'll be pulling from the web, from sites like Unsplash, will generally be in JPEG format because they're already edited and don't have the complex design elements that your finished creation would have. So if you're not trying to save on space too much, I would just recommend saving your creations as PNG files, and then you can always use free online tools to compress your images or change file types, which is something we're going to talk about later on. But it's important to note that you can always go down in file size and also in dimensions, but you can't really take an image and make it larger without then compromising on quality. So that's why we try to save in the best quality and format possible. Then we have two different types of digital graphic files. We have rasters and vectors. And I know this is maybe going to seem a bit complicated, but I promise there's a reason we're learning this, because you will hear this get thrown around a lot, not just within this course, but also in a lot of websites where you're going to continue to upskill past this course. So it is important. So a raster graphic is made up of a grid of many pixels, whereas a vector graphic is made up of many lines or paths. So the main difference between a vector and a raster is essentially the ability for you to scale that graphic. So since a raster is made up of a certain amount of pixels at a certain point, scaling that image is going to become what we would call pixelated or blurry, but a vector doesn't actually have that problem. So because it can be scaled to any size without losing that sharp edge and all that beautiful contrast, it's generally the best option for logos, which often have a really big range of applications, from like the teeny tiny size of a pencil or the side of a pencil to the side of a building. So that's why we want to save things in vector format whenever possible. Canva now has a feature for you to export in SVG, which is a vector file. So if this is something that you need, where you need a graphic to be printed on a poster or a t-shirt, you'll have the ability to export it as a vector. But keep in mind that photos can't actually be made into vectors. There are some exceptions. There are some AI tools that do this, but it's not converted one-to-one. So if you're trying to save a photo as a vector, it doesn't just magically make it into a vector unless it's converted properly. So that's getting a bit complicated, but essentially photos will come in raster format. Vectors are usually saved for illustrations and shapes. Then other than just size and the usage, it's also really important for you to decide whether you're designing for web or for print. If you would like to have the potential to use your graphic for both purposes, then design it for print in mind, as it's the higher quality format and you can always repurpose it for web. And the main difference in using it for web or print is that your dimensions will either be in pixels for web or in inches or centimeters for print, because of what we talked about with rasters and vectors. So this is important because web graphics will normally be at 72 pixels per inch or ppi, while print materials will have a resolution of 300 dpi or dots per inch. That sounds super jargony, but all this means is that in web graphics, there will be 72 tiny pixels of color in every inch of that graphic, whereas print materials will require 300 little colored dots per inch, making them a beautiful solid color when printed. All you really have to concern yourself with at this point is, does it need to be printed? If it does, then make sure you're just setting up your design document in the right dimensions, in centimeters or inches, so that it has all of the things that it needs in order to be printed in the correct dimensions. And then Canva's pretty much going to take care of the rest in terms of your resolution. And it's also going to allow you to export it as PDF for print. So that's going to give you that nice crisp design. And if that's not really making sense at this stage, it's okay. We're going to go over this a lot when we go into the Canva for Business section of the course, when we talk about printing ebooks and printing business cards. So you're going to see how that all works in action. I just wanted you to be familiar with the idea of designing for print versus digital, because there are some subtle differences. So kerning is not something you need to know about in terms of the actual term for it, but it's essentially just the adjustment of spaces between characters. And in Canva, the reason this is relevant is because you will be able to play around with this through their letter spacing tool. And you want to make sure you're essentially just not squishing your letters a little bit too much, but you also want to make sure that your letters are not so far apart that it's really hard to actually read the words they're supposed to form. Then much like kerning, you want to make sure that all of your letters are evenly spaced out and that their line height is appropriate for the graphic that you're creating, which again are some of the tools we're going to be playing around with. Now, I've been teaching this course for a long time now, and one of the most common mistakes that I see my students making is not having enough contrast between the text and the background of their graphics. So make sure to keep your contrast high to prevent this issue, which is something we're going to practice a lot. And another common mistake is the overuse of capital letters when it comes to handwritten fonts or script fonts. Some brands exclusively use capital letters, which is totally fine, but these are best saved for sort of sans serif fonts, which, as you'll remember, have that minimalistic or modern feel. Finally, you also want to make sure you're being careful with your type size. So of course, it's better for your text to be too big than too small, but neither option is great in this instance. And text that's too small on desktops, if you're designing on a desktop, will often be completely unreadable on a mobile device. So you really want to make sure that you are designing with your type size, your contrast, your capitalization, and all of these things in mind, which again, we're going to put into practice throughout the course. Then let's talk about hierarchy. So this is quite a funny post that I thought I would include. And you can, of course, pause this lesson if you want to have a look at it. But this is essentially demonstrating why hierarchy is so important, because your brain naturally works in specific sizes and in color contrast. There's a method to the madness when it comes to hierarchy. So within the world of design, this refers to the arrangement of the visual elements in order to signify importance. So essentially, the most important elements are made to hold the most attention by being bigger, more colorful, or using a particular font. And the reverse is true for the least important elements on the page. So just remember that if you're designing a graphic and everything sort of stands out, then nothing is really standing out. So don't be afraid to highlight the most important parts of your design for your audience. Now, a lot of times it's really easy to get caught up in your brand and style and forget who the actual intended audience is for that particular design. And this is actually really true when you're working within Canva for your own business or for other clients, and then you have to design your child's birthday invitation or something, and it ends up looking super corporate because that's just how your brain is wired. So that's why I've sort of used this example here, because it's really good to remember that yes, you want your design to look fantastic. If it's not right for the people that you're actually trying to communicate with and design for, then it's just not going to work. So always remind yourself that you're designing for the brand, of course, but you're also really designing for their target audience. And just like you have a palette of colors, you should also have a carefully selected palette of fonts, which is something we already talked about. But just like colors, certain fonts definitely have moods or emotions associated with them. So you probably wouldn't use something like Comic Sans to represent a law firm, for example. So you want to make sure that your fonts not only work well together, but really work well with the brand and their intended audience. And this is perhaps the most important lesson that I can give you in the world of design, which is to try not to do too much. Because especially when you're a beginner, you have all of these amazing skills and all this amazing knowledge in your brain, and you just want to put it all into action. And then you end up doing way too much, and it ends up being way less effective than if you did less. And the way I'll put it to you is, think about this particular course. There's a reason why there are so many lessons in the course, and each lesson covers 1 or 2 new skills, because these skills don't all just belong in one design. They each have their own purpose in different designs. So it's nice to just keep things simple whenever possible. So just remember that sometimes the empty parts of your design can be just as important as the ones you fill. Space can really help to bring more focus on a specific aspect of your composition, and it can let your design breathe, and it can help to balance everything out and bring some sophistication to your design a lot of the time. Now let's talk about calls to action. This is something that's probably a little bit more common with website design, but even on really simple graphics, you'll often see companies who are advertising a sale. They're asking for an email. They're asking for a subscriber. They're asking people to follow. They're giving you their phone number. They're just doing so much in one tiny graphic, and it's so much to focus on that people don't really know what action to take. So you want to limit each graphic to 1, maybe at the absolute maximum 2 calls to action. Then finally, you always want to make sure that you know what your designs look like on a phone screen, because just because something looks great on your computer screen, especially if you've got external monitors and you've got this giant screen and everything looks great, does not mean that it'll work on Instagram or another mobile app. So always check, and check again. So I know that was a lot of information, and like I said, we're going to be putting it all into action. So you're going to feel really confident in actually using these tips and strategies and this terminology all throughout the course. But I know it's not the most exciting stuff in the world. I'm just really grateful that you were able to stick with me through it. And now in the next section of the course, we are going to dive into your Canva workflow and how to make the most out of the time that you spend within Canva. But first, I want to get to our very first design exercise in the next lesson. So I'll see you there. So you'll remember at the beginning I said that we learn by doing, not just by watching other people do stuff. So this is your opportunity to put what you've learned up until this point into action. And you can do this exercise for yourself as a personal brand, for your business, or an existing brand out there, or a completely made up brand that has come out of your imagination. But either way, actually just doing this for a business of your choosing is going to allow you to have a brand that you can create assets for throughout the course so you can practice as we go. Now, I want to be clear that as you do this, you might find that when we get to designing, you'll put these colors that you choose and fonts that you choose and all these brand assets, you might put them into action within Canva and realize that actually they don't really work together as well as you'd hoped, especially when we get to talking about accessibility. There's so many times that I've created something like this for a client and gone, ooh, when I put this into a design, it's completely gibberish and unreadable, and these fonts don't work on a small phone screen, even though they look beautiful on desktop. And you won't really know that until we actually start designing. The point at this point is to just take action and create something, and we can sort of tweak and refine as we go. But at this point, I just want you to refer to the exercise in your course guide so that we can outline the following. Identify the brand name of the business that you're going to be designing for throughout the course. Again, you can totally make this up, or it can just be your own name or an existing business. Anything is fine, just a brand that you can use to practice your skills on as we go through these lessons. Then I know this is a little bit out of the box in terms of what we're covering in this course, but I would love it if you would choose some brand values for your business or your fictitious business. So you can pick 4 to 5 core values that you think are representative of your brand. Even if it's a made up brand, you can use this list for inspiration and just choose 4 to 5 values that you think you would like people to associate with this brand. Then create a color palette for your brand inside of Coolers or a different tool that we've used throughout the course. And then we'll organize this later on inside of Canva. If you're a Canva Pro user, you will have access to as many colors and color palettes as you want. As a free user, you will only be limited to 3 colors in your brand kit, but there are workarounds to this, and I will be showing you that in the next section of the course. So still feel free to choose as many colors as you want, but not too many. Then you want to choose ideally 2, but maximum 3 fonts for your brand using the resources that we covered in our fonts lesson, and maybe add some links to these inside of a Google Doc or somewhere else so that we can organize these later on. But keep in mind that only Canva Pro users can import fonts into Canva. So if your chosen fonts are not within Canva and you're on the free plan, you may have to find a font equivalent that is within Canva and free for you to use. So if you'd like to skip this step until we get inside of Canva so you can pick from the fonts that are available to you, that is totally okay by me. And then gather 5 to 10 free images and 5 to 10 free videos that you think could be used in social media content for your brand using the websites that we've discussed so far. And you can just download these to your computer for now or save them to a cloud storage. And I'll be showing you how to utilize these and organize these within Canva in the next section of the course. And all of this is really at this point just an exercise in gathering assets and getting some inspiration. And in the next section of the course, we're going to then talk about how to organize all of this within Canva so you can actually use it for your design work. So make sure to just go and gather some inspiration and gather a few assets using the tools that we've already used in this section. And now the next section of the course, we're going to dive into Canva workflow and how you can utilize it to the best of your abilities, which is full of basically all the tips that I wish I knew when I first started designing within Canva. So I'll see you in the next lesson.